This is OPPO's new foldable device, the OPPO Find N2. It was a part of the OPPO Inno Day announcement from about a week ago, and I gotta be straightforward and honest with you guys, I didn't get to spend much time with it. I only have 1 week to play with it before I need to return it back to OPPO, and by the time that I did all of our usual tests, it was already day 3. Nonetheless, I tried my best to use the device as much as I can so that I could give you a proper user experience review in this video. There will be a lot of references and comparison with the Galaxy Z Fold 4 too, which is my daily driver since it was launched. So let's begin. I'll try to talk about the OPPO Find N2 objectively first, and then I'll leave all of my thoughts, opinions, and also comments at the usability segment of this video. Everything is timestamped, so you can skip directly to the segment that you want. Starting off with the unboxing. If you buy the OPPO Find N2, then you'll get this fancy box and you can watch our unboxing at the top right corner. You'll also find a case inside the box which comes in 2 pieces of hard plastics. They do require adhesives to stick to the phone. Love it or hate it, cases for foldable devices oftentimes require adhesives, and there's just no way around it unless you want your case to slide around. I won't talk much about the chipset since this phone is using the Snapdragon 8 Plus Gen 1 and you already know how amazing this chipset really is. You can play games on this phone, but we'll keep the playability or usability part in the later segment in this video. Now I'm gonna talk about the cameras first. It is tuned by Hasselblad and there are a total of 3 different cameras available, and I'll just show you all of the pictures that I've taken over the course of 1 week of using this phone. This OPPO Find N2 is also using the same Mari Silicon X chip that is found on the OPPO Find X5 Pro as well. Overall, the pictures do look good, though I don't know why this picture of the pink flower just gets oversaturated to the point where even the edges of the flower petals are gone. The night shots on this phone though, they do look exceptionally well, except for the telephoto camera which couldn't capture the 3 leaves properly. Okay, so the design of the OPPO Find N2. It looks completely different from the Galaxy Z Fold 4 as it is shorter and wider, which changes the entire user experience. The Find N2 is also a whole lot thinner thanks to the 2nd generation FlexForm hinge. OPPO says that this hinge allows a thinner and lighter design with almost invisible crease, and that is because it folds in a teardrop shape at the folding point, which also creates a larger turn radius, hence lessening the stress at the folding point. We do have a hinge that also locks itself in place, and we have a range of 45 to 125 degrees to choose from, which OPPO is calling this the FlexForm mode. Essentially, this FlexForm mode is OPPO's version of Samsung's Flex mode, which we'll also revisit later. What's weird though is that both the speakers of the OPPO Find N2 are pointed downwards. Does it really matter though? Well, we'll also talk about this in the later segment in this video. Before we get ahead of ourselves, let's talk about the screens. Starting with the cover display. It is using a 5.54-inch display with a very standard aspect ratio of 17.7 by 9 with a resolution of 2120 by 1080 pixels in resolution, and it can also go up to 120Hz refresh rate. Once we unfold the device, we have a 7.1-inch display with a resolution of 1792 by 1920 pixels. And the maximum refresh rate is also at 120Hz, but the aspect ratio though is at 14 by 15. And if you did the math, this is actually very close to a true square display, and we'll talk about this in the later segment video because it truly affects the usability of this phone. So using our color meter, we tested the color accuracy. So at 100 nits of brightness, the cover display is pretty good, although the delta E number is quite high. And for the unfolded display, we split it into 3 parts, the left, right, and center where the crease line is. Surprisingly, the color accuracy is also remarkably consistent throughout the 3 segments. Even the delta E number is also consistent as well. Then we tested the maximum brightness. The cover display has a maximum brightness of about 480 nits, whereby the unfolded display can go slightly higher than 500 nits, but it is not consistent throughout the display, as I found out that the brightness drops as it gets to the right side of the screen. At about 500 nits of brightness though, it is not enough for outdoor usage, especially when it is sunny. This is where I want to tip my hat off to Samsung because the Galaxy Z Fold 4 has a maximum brightness of higher than 750 nits for both the cover display and also the unfolded display. And that is just unparalleled in the smartphone market in general. And as a quick mention though, the humongous black hole at the top left corner of the screen on the OPPO Find N2 is also quite distracting. I also quickly want to highlight the battery life before we proceed further. Calibrated at 100 nits of brightness, the cover display of the OPPO Find N2 can last for about 12 hours, whereby the unfolded display can last for about 10 hours and 35 minutes, and it is actually quite similar to the Galaxy Z Fold 4's battery life. Okay, now we move on to the software. This OPPO Find N2 does come with ColorOS 13, which is running on top of Android 13. Our unit of the OPPO Find N2 is from China, so it doesn't have the Google Play Store out of the box. However, it does have all of the Google service dependencies installed, so you can just install the Play Store app and then everything works flawlessly. This is where I will also compare with the Galaxy Z Fold 4 a lot more, because most of the features available on the Find N2 are also similar on the Galaxy Z Fold 4, and the Find N2 also has a much better aggregated settings menu because all of the foldable related features are in one single menu, which I think is really good. It makes changing settings, especially for new users, a whole lot easier and also digestible, since we can just go through everything in that single menu, and then you can have more or less close to perfect to how you want it to be. But unfortunately though, this is where the OPPO Find N2 falls short, because there aren't many special features that are well made to take advantage of the foldable form factor. And this is where we will have to talk about the big segment in this video, which is the usability. No joke, from the moment that I unboxed this device, I immediately tested out the hinge and it felt amazing. The hinge smoothness makes opening and closing this device so much better, and with that less noticeable crease though, yeah, it is just so much better looking and feeling compared to the Galaxy Z Fold 4. What's even better is that the Find N2 is thinner when closed, and it leaves no gap thanks to the teardrop folding design, and that means I don't have to wipe away all the dust and lint every time I want to use the device. However, the Find N2 speaker, since both of them are pointed downwards, back to the same question that I asked just now, does it really matter? Well, I think it does, but not in the way that you expect. You see, we have to talk about the unfolded display first. Since the aspect ratio is 14:15, it's technically 0.9333, which is very close to 1, and that means absolute squareness. Watching videos or playing games using the unfolded display either in portrait or landscape mode, it doesn't really matter because the difference is just so tiny since it is nearly square in shape. Then for the cover display though, it is a lot wider than the Galaxy Z Fold 4, but this is where I think it is more or less like a double-edged sword, because yes, I do prefer the cover display on the OPPO Find N2 because I can see more, but the wideness is doubled when you unfold the display, hence making the unfolded display nearly square. And by the way, since the cover display is so wide, it is also nearly impossible to be used one-handed. And I gotta say, after experiencing both phones, I kinda prefer the cover display to be somewhere in between these two phones. The Galaxy Z Fold 4 is way too lanky, but the N2 is too tubby. For the unfolded display though, I honestly prefer the Galaxy Z Fold 4 a lot more, but the reasons are a bit more nuanced. If you select apps like Twitter and Facebook to use full screen mode, then a lot of contents will be difficult to view without scrolling at all. This, however, is even more apparent on the OPPO Find N2 because that nearly square display means that the top and bottom part of the screen will be taken up by the app's UI, leaving not much space for the content. Instagram is particularly problematic because if I lock the app into 16:9 or 4:3 aspect ratio, then I'm going to lose some real estate between these two phones, that's for sure. But it is exceptionally more significant on the Find N2's nearly square display. I had a short discussion with a friend who is also reviewing the OPPO Find N2 as well, and he stated that shooter games like COD Mobile are quite unplayable using full screen mode because the FOV or the field of view is cropped off significantly. Then the folding halfway mode. Samsung calls this the flex mode, whereby OPPO calls it the FlexForm mode. They both literally mean the same thing, and OPPO's hinge has a wider angle to select, but the software integration is just not enough, I would say. By default, you can leave the phone half open and then this menu will pop up. You can then swipe to select what apps you want to use, which we only have camera and calculator apps supported as of now. The camera UI is familiar if you have used the Galaxy Z Fold 4's camera in flex mode before, and we also have the usual option to use the cover display as a viewfinder for selfies. And there is also an option to swap the viewfinder position between the upper half and the lower half of the screen. Once we press the shutter button though, I think Samsung's execution here is so much better in terms of integration. It has a segment to display the photo that we've just took, and we can also tap on the picture to enter the gallery. Then in the gallery app, we now have a touchpad, so we can just scroll to the next or previous picture and even double tap to zoom if we want to do that. However, on the OPPO Find N2, it just opens up the regular gallery app with no special integration with the FlexForm mode. I think this is just a huge missed opportunity for OPPO. One big feature that the OPPO Find N2 doesn't have is the taskbar. I have no idea why OPPO just didn't integrate and include it, since they're using Android 13 anyway, which should have all of the features from Android 12L, and that means that yeah, the taskbar should have been there as well. They just have to tap into the API. Without the taskbar, multitasking on the OPPO Find N2 just feels like a bigger phone. That's it. And before we end, I also need to talk about a few more things. The OPPO Find N2 does not have IP rating, and it does not even have wireless charging, which to me is a weird exclusion. But the OPPO Find N2 does have HDMI output, since it is using a high-speed USB 3.0 Type-C port. Nice! So all in all, I think that the OPPO Find N2 has phenomenal hardware, especially the hinge. The cover display aspect ratio is definitely up for debate, as I prefer something taller than the Find N2 but not as tall as the Z Fold 4. And I also personally find that the nearly square unfolded display to be a little bit difficult to use and to be grabbed with one hand actually. I still don't know if OPPO is going to sell this phone anywhere else in the world, because according to Android Authority, the global launch for the OPPO Find N2 is still under discussion. I truly hope this phone comes to other parts of the world as well, because yeah, the world needs more than just Samsung foldables, and more competition is always better, but I think that's it. This is a long video. Goodbye, I'm done. Yeah, I think this is our last review for the year 2022 as well. This is the real one, not the gaming phone. Cut, cut, cut.